children receiving Medicaid services in Prince George's County. I'm also co-facilitator and vice president of Maryland Trans Unity, which is a volunteer, peer-led support group for transgender people here in Montgomery County. I'd like to thank Julia and Reverend Rebecca for inviting me, and I'm glad to be joining you on this Easter Sunday and Transgender Day of Visibility and the start of April, which is Autism Acceptance Month. In 2016, I received my court order for name change in the mail on Easter Sunday weekend. So I like how this year everything is just blending nicely together. The coming out rates for the transgender, non-binary, and non-heterosexual communities are growing. This is because of a gradually increasing visibility, acceptance, recognition, and health and support resources. The diagnosis rate of autism in children is also growing because of increased recognition and better diagnosing and screening in people assigned female at birth and other non-white minority populations. On that note, I want to briefly mention the need for disability support services and the need for staff support is growing. So for anyone in college or for those who are listening who are in college, please consider majors such as social work and psychology or special education. Some jobs in this field can be done part-time. A good majority of our jobs are rarely impacted by government shutdowns or pandemics. In 2019, my boss started letting us work on a hybrid basis, and during the pandemic, I did additional contract work for a disability service agency based in Baltimore, whose employee base had been working remotely before the pandemic. Anyways, in addition to being transgender and autistic, I am of East Asian background, and I was adopted at the age of 6 months from Taiwan. Visibility, inclusivity, and accessibility is important, and this intersection of being transgender, autistic, adopted, and of East Asian descent is what I would like to highlight. I'm sure some of you may have heard some disability organizations say, we support people with different abilities. Well, what about people with disabilities or who are disabled? I rarely hear a woman who is transgender. I most often hear a transgender woman. In the autistic community, there is debate on the use of person-first language, such as person with autism, versus identity-first language, such as autistic person. Many autistic people prefer identity-first language. Autism is one type of developmental disability, and non-autistic people are sometimes referred to as neurotypical. In the greater developmental disability field, there have been movements or slogans with messages saying, see the person, not the disability. In a recent BBC News article for World Down Syndrome Day, the headline reads, Down syndrome is an ability, not a disability. A friend of mine commented on Facebook saying, maybe that person doesn't need support services. It is important we work towards ending the externalized and internalized shame and stigma of disability, whether it be developmental, physical, intellectual, or mental. Some of us transgender people feel like we have to mask or live stealth in multiple settings. Many of us autistic and neurodiverse people also feel like we have to mask all the time. Of course, there may be moments we have to code switch, so to say, even to our benefit or comfort of others. But we should not need to do so in every single setting. When we do come out transgender to someone, we might get, oh, I could never tell, or I had no idea. Well, give me a Tony Award for Best Cisgender Performance. When we do disclose a not so visible disability, such as quote-unquote high-functioning autism, we are sometimes met with, oh, but you don't look autistic. Well, you guessed it, give me another Tony Award for Best Neurotypical Performance. Visibility is important. Acceptance and access to information and education on disability, race, gender identity, and sexual orientation is important. Again, as I mentioned, I was adopted adopted at the age of 6 months from Taiwan. The mom who raised me, who died from skin cancer in her 50s when I was in high school, was Caucasian, and the dad who raised me, with whom I have been estranged since early 2019, is the son of Chinese immigrants. Growing up, I had Latino babysitters from El Salvador and Nicaragua. Often the discussions I hear about race are mostly about black or white people. As someone whose racial background doesn't always fit into the traditional black-white binary, I believe inclusive language is important. Who we include or exclude in discussions is the difference between visibility and invisibility. After this past Thanksgiving, someone I know said to me and others, "I hope you had a good Thanksgiving with family, chosen or biological." I kindly pointed out to her that I was adopted as an infant and I didn't get to choose the family in which I was raised. This also makes me think about doctors and nurses asking about medical history, assuming all of us are biologically related to parents or know our biological family history. I go to church at Westmoreland Congregational United Church of Christ. For the Lord's Prayer, we now say our God, well, most of us, instead of our Father. How we talk about family relations is also a matter of visibility and accessibility. Many of us in the neurodiverse community experience sensory sensitivities. Being mindful of noise volume and pitch and aroma or scent in different environments is a matter of accessibility to those with sensory processing sensitivities. And this is very important to consider when planning Pride festivities. And this can also help with queer disability visibility. Being mindful of the gender language we use is important to visibility and accessibility. How we talk about family relations is important to visibility and accessibility. So, while we celebrate visibility, let us go forth and think about how we will enhance accessibility, acceptance, and visibility. Amen, and thank you.
Amen.